where we explore the darkest depths of human nature and the cases that leave entire communities in shock. Today's episode covers the tragic and disturbing case of Quinn Donalds, a 19-year-old high school senior from Keokuk, Iowa. This case involves an unimaginable betrayal that led to her untimely death. At its core lies a tangled web of jealousy, violence, and family secrets, exposing how a mother's envy and a forbidden affair unraveled into tragedy. Quinn Donalds was the embodiment of potential. A 19-year-old senior at Keokuk High School, she was described by friends as kind-hearted and shy but driven. She worked part-time at a grocery store, hoping to save money for college, and spent her free time drawing and dreaming of a brighter future away from her troubled home. Despite her reserved personality, she made a strong impression on those around her, earning admiration for her quiet strength and creativity. However, her life at home was far from peaceful. Quinn lived with her mother, Randy Donalds, and stepfather, Bruce Donalds. The household was a cauldron of unresolved tension, with Randy's unpredictable moods and Bruce's intimidating presence creating a volatile environment. For Quinn, home was not a place of comfort, but one of constant emotional upheaval. Randy Donalds was a 37-year-old woman who had faced her own struggles. Battling years of low self-esteem, alcoholism, and failed relationships, she viewed her daughter's blossoming youth and confidence as a threat. The jealousy was subtle at first, passive-aggressive comments about Quinn's looks or friendships, but it grew more hostile over time. Randy's own relationship with Bruce was marked by insecurity and volatility, further amplifying her envy. She often felt overshadowed by her daughter, whose natural beauty and potential for a brighter future highlighted Randy's own regrets. This simmering resentment poisoned their relationship and set the stage for the tragedy that would follow. The affair between Quinn Donalds and her stepfather Bruce was a deeply disturbing secret that not only shattered trust within the household, but also set off a chain of events leading to her death. Bruce, a 25-year-old man with a domineering presence, had always been a complicated figure in the family. Much younger than Randy, his marriage to her was already strained by frequent arguments and an underlying lack of trust. The exact circumstances of how the affair began remain murky, but investigators believe it started subtly, with Bruce offering Quinn attention and validation she may have felt was lacking in her troubled home life. To Quinn, it may have been an escape, albeit a dangerous one. For Bruce, it was likely an exploitative relationship built on manipulation. The affair was uncovered by Randy when she stumbled upon explicit text messages between the two on Bruce's phone. This discovery ignited Randy's deep-seated jealousy and rage, driving her into a spiral of instability. She confronted both Bruce and Quinn, but the damage to her trust and self-worth was irreparable. This toxic dynamic fueled the tension in the Donalds household, setting the stage for the tragic events to come. Quinn dreamed of escaping her chaotic life in Keokuk. She longed to leave behind the constant strife with her mother and the suffocating confines of her small-town existence. She often spoke to her closest friends about her plans to enroll in a community college in Kansas, where she hoped to study art and design. Drawing was her passion, and her sketchbooks were filled with intricate designs and landscapes that reflected a yearning for freedom and peace. For Quinn, moving away represented more than just pursuing an education. It was her ticket to independence and a brighter future. These dreams also made her mother, Randy, feel increasingly alienated. Randy perceived Quinn's aspirations as a rejection of her, exacerbating her insecurities and envy. It was a cold, overcast morning on January 28, 2014, when a school maintenance worker named Carlos Tangana made the grim discovery. While clearing snow in the high school parking lot in Keokuk, Iowa, Carlos noticed a large object partially buried in the snow, an unusual sight given the area had been cleared just a few hours earlier. As he approached, he realized it was the lifeless body of Quinn Donalds, her clothes scattered, her face bruised and frozen. Carlos immediately called 911 and the police arrived shortly afterward. The community was shocked. Quinn, a beloved 16-year-old high school student, was found in a state that left no doubt this was no accident. Her body was positioned in a way that suggested it was deliberately left there, abandoned to succumb to the freezing conditions of the early morning. The discovery marked the beginning of a chilling investigation into Quinn's death. The crime scene was thoroughly examined by law enforcement and forensic teams. Quinn's body was discovered near the center of the parking lot, her clothes partially disheveled, her hands bruised. Investigators Investigators noticed that there were no signs of a struggle on the snow around her, but her body showed clear indications of blunt force trauma, particularly to her head. It appeared that she had been struck with a heavy object before being left in the snow, a decision that had likely been made to ensure she would not survive. The snow itself was an important element of the investigation. It helped preserve the scene, with footprints and tire tracks remaining visible. Investigators traced the tire marks leading away from the scene, which would later prove crucial in identifying where Quinn was transported before being left at the school. These marks indicated that she had been moved in a vehicle, leading detectives to believe that the killer was someone close enough to Quinn to have had access to a car. The discovery of Quinn Donald's body was only the beginning of a long and complex investigation. Detective Olga Slaughter was assigned the case, bringing with her years of experience. As soon as she arrived at the crime scene, she began to piece together the facts. Quinn had been a beloved teenager, known for her artistic talents and her close-knit relationships with friends. The community was shocked, and local law enforcement had to act quickly. Detective Slaughter began by interviewing Quinn's family, friends, and teachers. She learned that Quinn had been distant in the weeks leading up to her death, especially after her mother, Randy, found out about her affair with her stepfather, Bruce. This tension was a major red flag. It was clear that there were unresolved issues at home. Additionally, Quinn's friends reported that she had been acting anxious and upset, especially after her mother found out about the affair and confronted her about it. This heightened the suspicion around her family members. Simultaneously, forensic investigators worked to gather physical evidence from the crime scene. The snow-covered parking lot where Quinn's body was found held crucial details. Tire tracks and footprints were still visible in the fresh snow, and investigators immediately started tracing these signs. They also gathered fibers from Quinn's clothing, which might later tie a suspect to the crime scene. However, at that early stage, the identity of the killer remained unclear, and Detective Slaughter knew that she would need to dig deeper into Quinn's relationships and background to uncover the truth. Bruce Donalds, Quinn's stepfather, was the first person to come under scrutiny. His affair with Quinn was a shocking revelation that immediately made him a prime suspect in the investigation. Bruce had married Randy, Quinn's mother, when Quinn was just a child. As he became more involved in the affair, Bruce began to play a more prominent role in Quinn's life. The affair had been going on for several months before Quinn's death, and the discovery of this relationship was catastrophic for the family. Bruce's initial reaction to Quinn's death was one of apparent confusion and distress. He insisted that he had no knowledge of how Quinn ended up dead, but his behavior was increasingly suspicious. During his interviews with investigators, he appeared to downplay the significance of the affair, claiming that it had ended months before Quinn's death. Yet, this statement seemed contradictory when investigators found evidence suggesting that the affair was ongoing up until the very days leading up to Quinn's death. Bruce was interrogated at length. Despite his insistence that he had no role in the murder, his answers were often vague, and his emotions seemed out of place. His calmness raised further suspicions, and some of the physical evidence linked him to the scene of the crime. Tire tracks from a vehicle resembling Bruce's car were found near the location where Quinn's body had been discovered. However, without solid proof, Bruce could not be formally charged, and the investigators had to explore other potential suspects. Randy Donalds, Quinn's mother, emerged as a key suspect in the investigation following the discovery of the affair between her daughter and her husband Bruce. Randy had been devastated when she learned of the affair and had been consumed with anger and jealousy. The emotional toll of the situation had deeply affected her. Randy's reaction to Quinn's betrayal had been extreme, and it became apparent that she harbored a growing resentment toward her daughter. Randy had been vocal about her disdain for Quinn's actions, particularly after Quinn threatened to expose the affair. This act of defiance had pushed Randy to a breaking point. Friends and family members testified that Randy had become increasingly volatile in the months leading up to Quinn's death. She had spoken openly of her anger at both Quinn and Bruce, even going as far as to call her daughter a traitor for carrying on the affair. When Randy was questioned by the police, her alibi for the night of the murder appeared to be shaky. She had claimed that she was at home alone, but there were discrepancies in her timeline, and certain witnesses reported seeing her car in the area of the crime scene on the night of Quinn's death. The investigators soon realized that Randy had the most to lose from the truth coming out. If Quinn revealed the affair, Randy would lose not only her marriage but her entire family. This personal crisis fueled Randy's deep feelings of betrayal, leaving her as the prime suspect in the case. Her behavior, however, was not without contradictions. She expressed deep sorrow and distress after Quinn's death, but there was a chilling undercurrent of guilt that seemed to manifest itself in her avoidance of certain topics during questioning. This inconsistency raised further suspicion. At one point, she claimed that she had loved Quinn more than anything, but it was clear from the investigation that the intense anger she had felt toward Quinn could have pushed her to a dangerous breaking point. Gene Wendler, Quinn's ex-boyfriend, was another suspect who came into focus during the investigation. Their breakup had been difficult, and although they had parted ways months before Quinn's death, Gene's feelings for Quinn seemed unresolved. He had been deeply attached to her, and the news of Quinn's affair with Bruce hit him particularly hard. Gene had been jealous and possessive during their relationship, traits that became more pronounced in the aftermath of their breakup. Gene's behavior after the breakup raised red flags. Several of Quinn's friends reported that Gene had been upset and angry when he learned about the affair. He had made several attempts to contact Quinn, but she had rejected his advances. Investigators uncovered messages Gene had sent Quinn expressing his frustration and jealousy over the affair. In one particularly disturbing message, Gene wrote, "I won't let you go that easily," suggesting that he had not fully let go of their past relationship. Though there was no concrete evidence to directly link Gene to the crime scene, his emotional volatility made him a person of interest. He was interrogated, and while his alibi checked out, he was with friends at the time of Quinn's death, there remained an undercurrent of suspicion. Gene's possessive nature, his inability to let go of their relationship, and the discovery of his obsessive behavior made him an additional layer of mystery in the case. Still, as the investigation continued, there was no solid physical evidence tying Gene to Quinn's murder. While he remained a potential suspect, investigators were beginning to narrow their focus, realizing that other suspects had more direct motives. Gene eventually fell lower on the list of suspects as evidence mounted against others, but his involvement was always a lingering question. As the investigation progressed, uncovering the motive behind Quinn's tragic death became the primary focus. Detectives reviewed all the relationships in Quinn's life to determine who might have had the most to gain from her death. Initially, many believed it was a crime of passion, a murder driven by personal betrayal or intense emotions. As they dug deeper into the backgrounds of Quinn's close family members and associates, the full scope of the motive began to take shape. The affair between Quinn and Bruce Donalds, her stepfather, was the crucial turning point. Although Bruce was initially seen as a potential suspect, his motives for murder were not as clear as Randy's. It became evident that Randy, his wife and Quinn's mother, had the most to lose if Quinn's affair was exposed. Randy had worked hard to maintain a facade of a perfect family, and the thought of Quinn's betrayal and the public scandal that would result from it was more than she could handle. The affair was not only a personal betrayal, but a threat to everything Randy had worked to build in her life. Emotional tapestries of jealousy, anger, and desperation began to emerge in the investigation. Randy's obsession with maintaining control over her family's reputation had made her feel cornered. The deeper they looked, the more investigators realized that Randy had a history of needing control and perfection in her personal life. Her reaction to Quinn's affair was a tipping point, and detectives theorized that this emotional turmoil, coupled with a desire to silence Quinn's threat to expose the affair, led to the murder. Randy's earlier conversations with close friends and family members had made it clear that she was devastated by Quinn's actions. Randy confided in them, expressing her deep hatred for Quinn, blaming her for ruining their family. These admissions, coupled with evidence from Quinn's phone and a few recorded conversations between mother and daughter, painted a picture of a volatile and explosive relationship. Quinn had expressed plans to confront her mother about the affair, and Randy knew this could mean the end of her marriage and social standing. One of the most pivotal pieces of evidence was found in Randy's personal journals. After examining these writings, the detectives uncovered several entries that detailed Randy's growing paranoia, her thoughts of revenge, and her obsession with maintaining control at any cost. It became clear that, in her eyes, Quinn had crossed a line, and her actions were unforgivable. This insight into Randy's emotional state gave the investigators the understanding they needed. Her motive was rooted in fear, shame, and a desperate attempt to preserve her dignity, no matter the cost. As the investigators pieced together the puzzle, they realized that the truth behind Quinn's death was far more complicated than anyone had initially suspected. The narrative of an innocent daughter falling victim to jealousy and rage unfolded in tragic detail as more evidence came to light. Randy's role as the murderer became undeniable. Through forensic evidence and a series of interviews with Randy, the timeline of the murder was established. Randy had confronted Quinn about the affair, and the confrontation had quickly escalated. What started as an argument over betrayal became a deadly encounter. It was during this heated argument that Randy, consumed by rage and humiliation, struck her daughter in the head, fatally injuring her. The physical evidence, including blood spatter patterns, indicated that the crime was committed in a violent fit of anger. However, Randy's actions following the murder were just as calculated as the act itself. After killing Quinn, she attempted to stage the scene, moving her daughter's body to the parking lot where it would appear as though Quinn had been abandoned or killed by someone else. The investigators were able to determine this because of surveillance footage from nearby businesses and tire tracks that matched Randy's car. Randy's panic and the attempt to cover her tracks were an attempt to deflect suspicion, but it ultimately worked against her. The breakthrough came when Randy was questioned about the details of her whereabouts that night. Initially, she had given conflicting statements about her actions, but the truth began to unravel when she was confronted with the evidence. In a final moment of breakdown, Randy confessed to the crime, revealing the intensity of her emotions and the deep sense of betrayal she had felt. The confession brought a sense of closure to the investigators, but it also shocked the community, who had never imagined that a mother could be capable of such violence. The truth about the motive was heartbreaking. It was not just a simple case of jealousy or rage. It was the result of years of emotional build-up, insecurity, and a desperate need for control. Randy's need to protect her family's reputation and maintain the perfect image she had worked so hard to build had led her to take the life of her own daughter. The truth that unraveled over the course of the investigation left everyone, including the family members and close friends, devastated and unable to comprehend the extent of the tragedy. Randy Donalds' trial was a highly charged emotional event. The courtroom was packed with onlookers, friends, family members, and media representatives eager to see justice served. The prosecution presented a clear and damning case against Randy, illustrating the emotional turmoil she had endured and how it had led to the unthinkable act of murder. They argued that Randy's jealousy, fear of losing control, and overwhelming sense of betrayal had culminated in the violent death of her daughter. The prosecution was able to demonstrate Randy's history of controlling behavior and emotional volatility through testimony from her friends and family. They presented evidence from Randy's journals showing that she had harbored deep anger toward Quinn for months leading up to the murder. The forensic evidence tied Randy to the crime scene, and the chilling confessions from her closest circle highlighted the deep emotional strain that had consumed her in the days before Quinn's death. Randy's defense team, on the other hand, attempted to paint a different picture. They argued that Randy had been a loving and dedicated mother who had been pushed to the brink by the intense emotional stress caused by Quinn's affair and the public scandal that would have followed. They claimed that Randy's actions were not premeditated and were driven by a moment of emotional collapse. They tried to argue for a reduced sentence, citing her remorse and the years of trauma she had suffered at the hands of her family's betrayal. Despite the defense's attempts to argue for leniency, the prosecution's case was strong, and the jury found Randy guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was a reflection of the emotional chaos that had led to Quinn's death, but it also underscored the need for accountability. Randy was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, and while the verdict brought some measure of closure to the family, the tragedy of Quinn's death could never be undone. In the aftermath of the trial, the impact of Quinn's death and the trial reverberated throughout her family, friends, and the community. The grief of losing Quinn was felt deeply by everyone who knew her. She had been a bright, ambitious young woman with so much promise, and her tragic death left a void that could never be filled. For Quinn's family, the aftermath was a painful reckoning. Bruce, Quinn's stepfather, had to come to terms with his role in the affair and the profound loss of both his daughter and his wife. He struggled with guilt, knowing that his actions had indirectly contributed to the unraveling of his family. Gene Wendler, Quinn's ex-boyfriend, was also left with a sense of mourning, unsure how to process the devastating loss of someone he had once cared deeply for. Randy's conviction and imprisonment were just the beginning of the family's healing process. The damage done to the family structure was irreversible, and although Randy expressed remorse for her actions, the impact of her crime was felt for years. Randy's time in prison became a period of self-reflection, but her emotional pain and guilt could not undo the devastation she had caused. In the community, Quinn's death became a somber reminder of the dangers of unchecked emotions, jealousy, and infidelity. Many people who knew her were left wondering how a family could fall apart so completely and how a mother could go so far as to kill her own daughter. The lessons learned from Quinn's death were harsh but necessary, serving as a warning to others about the destructive power of unresolved emotions. As the years passed, Quinn's memory was honored in various ways. A scholarship was established in her name to help young artists pursue their dreams, something Quinn had always aspired to. Though her death left a painful scar, her legacy lived on in those who remembered her. The tragedy of her murder left a profound impact on everyone involved, but it also provided a sense of closure and the reminder that no amount of anger or betrayal should ever justify taking another person's life. If you found this story both compelling and heartbreaking, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories and in-depth analyses. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to light, reminding us of the complexities of human emotions and the consequences of unchecked actions. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions on this case and any suggestions for future content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.